The show begins with Choi Sun-hui coming home from school. She notices her friend Soo-yeon's workbook in her bag, so she decides to return it. On her way to Soo-yeon's house, Sun-hui sees Soo-yeon going into Kyeon-ho's house. Even though Kyeon-ho and Sun-hui like each other, Sun-hui decides to go back home. Inside Kyeon-ho's house, Soo-yeon sees him setting up a fancy meal to propose to Sun-hui. Soo-yeon gets angry because of something Kyeon-ho says and threatens to kill him with a knife. Sun-hui hears the noise from outside and goes inside to see Soo-yeon holding a knife with her burnt head exposed. Soo-yeon is about to attack, but Kyeon-ho jumps in to protect Sun-hui and gets stabbed instead. Kyeon-ho dies and Sun-hui goes back home with her uniform covered in his blood. At home, Sun-hui's mother, Eunju, is shocked to see her daughter covered in blood. Sun-hui tells her mother that she killed Kyeon-ho and starts crying. The episode then flashes back to Soo-yeon's first day at school. Sun-hui and her friends Kyeon-ho and Hyun-woo are in the same class. The teacher introduces Soo-yeon as the new student. Soo-yeon tries to talk to Sun-hui, but realizes that Sun-hui doesn't remember her. Feeling embarrassed, Soo-yeon goes to her seat, still watching Sun-hui. During lunch break at school, Sun-hui is eating with Kyeon-ho and Hyun-woo when Kyeon-ho talks about Sun-hui's peanut allergy. They chat about how perfect Sun-hui's family is, mentioning how her mom always packs her lunch and her dad is great at his job. Soo-yeon, sitting nearby, hears this and decides to leave. That night, Sun-hui's dad, Jin Haeok, wins an award for excellence. His wife, Eunju, and daughter, Sun-hui, celebrate with him. The next day at school, a boy in Sun-hui's class gives her a gift. Kyeon-ho seems jealous, while Hyun-woo jokes around with Sun-hui. Later, Kyeon-ho gives Sun-hui a custom swan keychain and she thanks him. Hyun-woo and Soo-yeon watch them from a distance. After school, Sun-hui tells Kyeon-ho and Hyun-woo that she needs to study. Soo-yeon finds Sun-hui alone in the classroom and tries to talk to her. She brings out a matchbox to remind Sun-hui of their childhood friendship. We then see a flashback of young Sun-hui being bothered by some boys when Soo-yeon steps in to help her. The two orphan girls talk about their families and Soo-yeon mentions that she doesn't know where her parents are. Sun-hui says that her mother passed away, but her father is still alive. At the orphanage, Sun-hui and Soo-yeon become good friends until one day Soo-yeon tells Sun-hui that she is going to be adopted. Back in the present, Soo-yeon says that her adoption was canceled because of an accident, but Sun-hui doesn't know about it. Sun-hui promises to help Soo-yeon in any way she can. Soo-yeon then asks to borrow the keychain that Kyeon-ho gave to Sun-hui. That night, Kyeon-ho and Hyun-woo are sitting on the basketball court, talking about Sun-hui. Hyun-woo says that Sun-hui will never return Kyeon-ho's feelings because she is too focused on her studies. Sun-hui shows up and asks her friends what they plan to do for her birthday, which gives Kyeon-ho an idea. Later, during dinner, Sun-hui is thinking about Soo-yeon and asks her dad for advice on how to talk to her friend. Jin Haeok suggests that Sun-hui write a letter to share her feelings. Meanwhile, Soo-yeon goes to her part-time job to pick up her paycheck, but finds out that her boss closed the shop because of his gambling debts. Soo-yeon is worried because she is struggling with money after enrolling in the private school that Sun-hui attends. At school the next day, Soo-yeon tries to ask Sun-hui for some money, but Sun-hui has earphones on and doesn't hear her. Feeling embarrassed, Soo-yeon shouts at Sun-hui, asking to borrow money. The whole class, including Kyeon-ho, is shocked by the scene. That night, in her hostel room, Soo-yeon's roommate asks if she's made any new friends at school. Soo-yeon says that even with financial help, it's been hard to make ends meet. The roommate asks if her childhood friend is helping her, but Soo-yeon replies that Sun-hui doesn't remember her anymore. The next day, Kyeon-ho gives some money to Soo-yeon and tells her to stop bothering Sun-hui. Soo-yeon gets angry and punches Kyeon-ho in the face. She yells at Sun-hui for treating her like a beggar and storms off. After school, Soo-yeon sees Sun-hui's parents picking up Sun-hui and Kyeon-ho in their car. Two classmates approach Soo-yeon, trying to befriend her by speaking badly about Sun-hui, but Soo-yeon doesn't join in and walks away. The next day, Kyeon-ho asks to speak with Soo-yeon alone and apologizes for giving her money without asking first. Soo-yeon feels touched by his apology and heads back to class, where she runs into Sun-hui. Sun-hui tells Soo-yeon that she asked Kyeon-ho to apologize, which makes Soo-yeon upset. Later, Soo-yeon talks with Hyun-woo about his feelings for Sun-hui. Hyun-woo tells Soo-yeon that both Sun-hui and Kyeon-ho come from wealthy families, and that he could never even think about dating Sun-hui. This comment makes Soo-yeon feel sad, and she wonders if someone like her, an orphan, should even dream of dating anyone. That night, Soo-yeon waits outside Sun-hui's academy and asks to talk privately. She takes Sun-hui to an empty parking spot and confronts her about the accident that caused her hair loss. Studian explains that after the accident, her burned scalp caused her adoption to be cancelled. She reminds Sunhui of the night before her adoption, when they were outside the orphanage and Sunhui accidentally started a fire. While most of the kids escaped, Sunyan got burned in the fire. After the incident, Sunhui was adopted, but Sunyan's adoption was cancelled because of her injury. A flashback shows young Sunyan reading a story to young Sunhui at the orphanage, putting her to sleep. Sunyan reminds Sunhui about the fire that ruined her life. Sunhui is shocked to learn that she caused the fire and says she thought Sunyan had already gone to live with her new parents before the night of the fire. She apologizes to Sunyan, but Sunyan says she will do everything she can to get what she deserves. That night, Sunhui can't sleep because she keeps thinking about how her mistake affected Sunyan. She decides to follow her father's advice and writes a letter to Sunyan, which she leaves on her desk the next day. Sunyan finds the letter and reads it on the rooftop. She feels moved by Sunhui's apology when the two other girls from their class arrive. The girls try to convince Sunyan to join them in bullying Sunhui, but instead Sunyan beats them up and warns them to stay away from Sunhui. She then returns to class and thanks Sunhui for the letter. Sunhui feels happy about this and heads home. On her way, Sunyan is confronted by two boys who beat her up. The boys are friends with the girls who wanted Sunyan to help them bully Sunhui. The boys attack Sunyan in an empty alley, but Kaiyang-ho shows up and saves her. He fights off the boys and threatens to expose the two girls in their class. The boys run away and Kaiyang-ho checks to see if Sunyan is okay. Hyunwoo arrives and tells Kaiyang-ho that the police are on their way. Kaiyang-ho grabs Sunyan's arm and they run away before the cops arrive. That night, Kaiyang-ho and Hyunwoo drop Sunyan off at her home to make sure she is safe. Sunyan feels touched by their kindness. The next day in class, she sees Kaiyang-ho and Sunhui taking photos together and offers to take a picture of them with Hyunwoo. Later, she asks if she can take a photo with Kaiyang-ho. That night, Sunhui invites Sunyan to have dinner at her house. Sunyan is surprised to see how luxurious Sunhui's life is and how loving her parents are. She goes home that night feeling uncomfortable. The next day, while Sunyan is emptying the classroom trash can, she overhears Kaiyang-ho and Hyunwoo talking. Hyunwoo tells Kaiyang-ho to forget about proposing to Sunhui, saying she is too focused on her studies to date. He suggests that Kaiyang-ho should ask Sunyan out since she seems to have feelings for him. Kaiyang-ho finds the idea strange and tells Hyunwoo that he isn't interested in Sunyan. He also says that he plans to ask Sunhui out that day. Hearing this, Sunyan gets upset and goes back to class. She angrily tells Sunhui that she's not a good friend and asks her to walk home with her after school. When school ends, Kaiyang-ho asks Sunhui to walk home with him, but she says no and explains she needs to go to the academy. She leaves with Sunyan. Sunyan walks Sunhui home that evening and then goes to meet Kaiyang-ho. Meanwhile, Sunhui realizes she accidentally took Sunyan's workbook and goes to return it. She sees Sunyan entering Kaiyang-ho's house and hears loud noises coming from inside. She enters the house and witnesses Sunyan stabbing Kaiyang-ho with a knife, killing him in his living room. That night, Sunhui returns home and tells her mother, Yeonju, that she killed Kaiyang-ho. She also says she left her phone and the workbook at Kaiyang-ho's house. Yeonju asks if Sunhui is sure she killed Kaiyang-ho and whether there were any other witnesses. Sunhui says she wants to turn herself in, but Yeonju forces her to clean herself up. Yeonju makes Sunhui a glass of milk and secretly adds something to make her sleep. The next morning, Sunhui wakes up and is shocked to see her phone and the workbook on her desk. She goes downstairs and finds her parents, Yeonju and Jin Hyuk, talking as if nothing happened. Yeonju sets the table for breakfast like normal. Sunhui finds their calmness strange after what happened the night before, but then something on the news broadcast catches her attention. The news report says that Kaiyang-ho's house caught fire, killing his entire family. Meanwhile, detectives Dong-ho and Sung-woo are at the scene investigating. Sung-woo explains to Dong-ho that cigarettes and paint thinner found in Kaiyang-ho's room started the fire. He mentions that the paint thinner wasn't unusual because Kaiyang-ho's father was a painter. Then, Dong-ho notices Sunyan in the crowd outside the burned-down house. He sees she is wearing a school uniform and tells Sung-woo to find out more about Kaiyang-ho's friends. A flashback shows Yeonju and Jin Hyuk visiting the orphanage and asking Sunhui to come home with them. Sunyan runs from Kaiyang-ho's house to see Sunhui. She tries to visit her, but Sunhui's mother, Yeonju, won't let her in. Sunyan insists and goes to Sunhui's room, finding her in shock. Sunyan tries to force Sunhui to go to the police with her and confess to the murder instead. She asks if Sunhui was the one who set Kaiyang-ho's house on fire and killed his parents, but Sunhui doesn't answer. Soo takes off her wig and tries to make Sun-hui feel guilty, saying she should take the blame for Kyeon-ho's death to make up for the injuries Soo got from the fire Sun-hui caused. Soo tries to drag Sun-hui out, but Jin Hyuk stops her. Upset, Soo leaves. Meanwhile, Sun-hui breaks down crying in her room. Soo skips school while the other students gossip about Kyeon-ho's supposed drug use. Hyun-woo defends Kyeon-ho and threatens to fight anyone who talks badly about him. Soo thinks about going to the police and remembers what happened at Kyeon-ho's house that led to his death. A flashback shows that after Kyeon-ho tells Soo he plans to ask Sun-hui out, Soo becomes upset. She tries to stop him, but gets angry when Kyeon-ho misunderstands her feelings. Unable to confess her true feelings for him, she decides to ruin his surprise. Soo shows Kyeon-ho the swan keychain and tells him that Sun-hui gave it to her because she didn't like him. Kyeon-ho asks Soo to give him the keychain and they start fighting. Soo gets angry and starts wrecking the painting and cake. During the fight, Soo loses her wig and feels embarrassed, wondering why she always seems to suffer. She picks up a knife and tries to harm herself, but Kyeon-ho tries to stop her. At the same time, Sun-hui hears the commotion outside and goes into the house. She sees Soo holding a knife at Kyeon-ho. When Sun-hui tries to intervene, Soo gets angry and tries to attack her. Kyeon-ho tries to protect Sun-hui and ends up dying. In the present day, Soo decides not to go to the police station and walks home instead. Jin Hyuk finds her walking on the street, offers her a ride, and takes her home. At home, Sun-hui tries to talk to her mother about the fire, but Yeonju acts like nothing happened and pretends everything is normal. At the police station, the detectives find a link between Soo and Kyeon-ho. Detective Dong-ho notes that Soo was at the crime scene that morning, while Sung-woo says she was absent from school that day. That night, Soo wakes up in Jin Hyuk's car, but he knocks her out by hitting her on the head. Soo manages to wake up and escape from the car when Jin Hyuk goes to get something from the trunk. Sun-hui tries to call Soo but can't reach her. She thinks about all the good times she had with Hyun-woo and Kyeon-ho and starts crying. Sun-hui looks up news reports about the fire and breaks down again. The next day, Hyun-woo comes to pick up Sun-hui to go to Kyeon-ho's funeral. They both pay their respects to Kyeon-ho and his parents. As they are leaving, Sun-hui collapses and loses consciousness. Jin Hyuk arrives and carries Sun-hui out of the funeral home. Outside, the police arrive and want to question Sun-hui. While Jin Hyuk talks to the police, Sun-hui finds the swan keychain in the car and picks it up. She remembers that it was last with Soo and notices she hasn't been answering her calls. Sun-hui starts to think that her father might be involved in the incident and feels scared. Inside the house of Sun-hui and her parents answer questions from the detectives. The detectives leave after not finding anything suspicious. Jin Hyuk praises Sun-hui for being strong and promises to protect her no matter what. Outside, Detective Dong-ho suspects Sun-hui might be guilty. Back in her room, Sun-hui tries calling Soo again and gets worried when she can't reach her. She asks Hyun-woo for Soo-yeon's address and decides to visit her. Sun-hui meets Soo-yeon's roommate and adoptive sister, who tells her that Soo-yeon hasn't come home since she left for school the day before. She explains that Soo-yeon sometimes disappears when she's in trouble. At the police station, the section chief tells Dong-ho to close the case, saying it was an accident. Then the forensic expert arrives and reveals that Kyeon-ho died from a stab wound. Dong-ho and Sung-woo tell their boss they need to investigate the case further. That night, Sun-hui returns home and tries to figure out where Soo-yeon might have gone. In the alley near her house, she meets a man named Choi Hyun-min, who says he is related to Jin Hyuk. Han-min asks Sun-hui if she knows who lived in the street view room in her house. Sun-hui looks confused, but Hyun-min apologizes for the strange question and leaves, saying he will see her again. Before he leaves, he whispers in Sun-hui's ear, warning her to be careful of her parents. Jin Hyuk watches the whole thing from his room. In a flashback, Kyeon-ho asks his father to review his painting. His father, a professional painter, calls the painting average. At school, Kyeon-ho and Sun-hui decide to draw each other. Sun-hui praises Kyeon-ho's drawing, which makes him feel better about himself, and he starts to fall in love with her. We see Kyeon-ho holding onto the painting that Sun-hui made for him.